Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Kelly Sorensen. I'm the Executive Director at Ventana Wildlife Society. And we're here to celebrate the International Vulture Awareness Day, which a lot of people don't have a whole lot of awareness about. So that's why we wanted to highlight that. And that was, of course, the main plan all along. And then the Dolan fire hit. So we've had a big change as of late, as I'm sure all of you know, and really struggling to get through this challenge. But all that said, things are going well as best as they can. And I want to thank everybody who's contributed to our Restore and Rebuild campaign to help us get the Condor's Big Sur Sanctuary back up and running as soon as possible. And of course, tonight we're going to have the conclusion to this evening's auction. With Feathers is the name for it, which stems from back in the day when we had live events in person, when it was entitled Feathers in Flight. This is our first attempt at an online auction, and with over 350 of you participating, I think we're off to a great start, and I think it's a success, and that's because of all of you. So I want to thank you for that as well. And then lastly, I just want to touch on collaboration, one of the cornerstones of the work at Ventana Wildlife Society. We love working with our partners, and our long-standing partners include the Los Angeles Zoo and Pinnacles National Park, just to name a couple. And in just a few minutes, Joe Burnett, who oversees our Condor program, will share with you a little bit about the recent event where a chick 1033 was saved from the Dolan fire, pulled from its nest and taken into the LA Zoo, where it is now being raised. And it's this kind of collaboration that is vital to the success to the Condor work that we do. And we are very lucky to have Mike Clark from the LA Zoo, who's going to be sharing with us this evening Dolly the Condor, plus the King Vulture. And I can't pronounce the name, so I won't even try. But I'm going to go ahead and thank Mike Clark, but then turn it over to Joe so you can give a quick update on the Big Sur Condors and introduce Mike. Thank you all for being here this evening.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I am just doing some stuff here. I want to get my video here real quick. Spotlighted. Anyway, yeah, thanks for coming out and joining us tonight. And thank you, Kelly, for the intro. As Kelly said, Los Angeles Zoo has been our partner for ever since we began. They've been a key partner in the Condor recovery program since the 80s, when they first started bringing in the wild birds, and they were one of the key captive breeding facilities. Mike Clark has been there pretty much from the beginning, and we also have tonight Debbie Sears joining us. So I'm excited to get to them. But before we do, I definitely wanted to give an update, and obviously the
Joe, can you share your screen? We can't see it.
yeah, I'm doing it right now. Everybody see this?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, tonight is a behind-the-scene looks at LA Zoo. We're going to meet two really cool vultures, Cacique and Dolly, and we'll get to that soon. I wanted to give the biggest update and the biggest news this week. Nico is alive. I think that that was a miracle in itself. Myself and Darren Gross were hiked up there to the nest on Wednesday. We finally got clearance through the fire, it took a lot longer than we had hoped, but again, we didn't want to get in the way, and we wanted to make sure the firefighters were safe. They wanted to make sure we were safe. So we finally got in and were able to confirm that indeed Nico survived. And that's definitely, you know, these redwoods, I like to think of them as they're kind of fire shields. They they really have a role with these nests and really protecting these chicks. And again, another amazing miracle with condors. And so Nico is alive and well. Mom is tending to Nico, which is great news. We haven't seen Dad yet. Kingpin has not been seen again since the fire burned through. We're still actively searching, and we'll continue searching for the next few weeks. We'll keep you posted on any news we find out, but just so everyone knows, Nico's Redwood Queen is taking good care. We've seen her, actually we saw her in the area of where some sea lions washed up on the coast, so she is looking for food, which is a good thing. And yeah, that's obviously the biggest news we had this week. And also, we successfully evacuated chick number 1033. This actually happened on the same day we got access to go to Nico, so our crew split up. And then we also had Pinnacles National Park come and help us. They have expert climbers like here. This is Alicia Welsh and Gavin Emmons climbed in the nest and brought the chick down in this little bucket right below her. It's one of the most amazing things to watch, highly skilled, and they got the chick down safely. And right when it got down, we transported it into on the left there, you can see we put it in a kennel carrier, and we transported it safely over to the vehicle, and the bird was immediately driven down to LA Zoo. And once the bird arrived at LA Zoo, Mike Clark and Chandra here and their veterinarian staff, they have a state-of-the-art hospital. They conducted a thorough physical exam and basically let us know that the chick looks great. It does still have an elevated lead level that they're going to work on, and we know it's probably coming down, but otherwise the chick is in great health. What will happen to 1033? So the plan is to basically raise this chick at LA Zoo with other birds that are going to get released later. Basically 1033 will be put into a release cohort and released and reunited back in Big Sur or Pinnacles next year. So it's kind of we were glad we got in to get this chick. We didn't have this opportunity with the window for Nico went out really quick, but the same fire that burned over Nico's nest was heading in the direction of this chick's nest, and we had a window to get it out, and we were so glad we did. It's in great hands right now with LA Zoo. And that's the latest from the field. We still have 11 missing condors. 9 of those are free-flying birds, adults, subadults, juveniles, and then we have 2 chicks that are still unaccounted for, so 11 total. Again, keep checking our Facebook page, our homepage, our website, and get on our e-newsletter, our email list, and you'll get all the updates. As we learn anything, we're getting it out as soon as possible. So again, the search continues. Cross your fingers that we find a few more, hopefully all of them, just to be the eternal optimist. But yeah, the fire definitely did a lot of damage, and we may have lost a few birds. So let's hope the damage wasn't that bad. And then next week, we hope to get up to our condor sanctuary and assess what the level of damage up there. We know from a distance that it looks pretty bad, so we'll actually get in there and see what happened and actually get to look around for birds too. So we're looking forward to that. Okay, I don't want to take too much time away here from Mike, but I just want to remind everyone that auction ends tonight. Go to our website, www.ventanaws.org, and get in on that last auction. It's the last chance to get some of your bid in. So that's, without further ado, let me escape here. Get down here. I'm going to get Mike and those guys on. All right, let's go here. Let's get Mike on. And let's introduce. Can everyone see the bird? Can everyone see that beautiful condor in view?
Yes. Yes.
So the condor on the right is Dolly, and the person on the left is Mike Clark. Mike Clark has been working with condors for a very long time. How long, Mike? 30 plus?
Yeah, this October will be 31 years.
Yeah, amongst the field folks, Mike is known as the Condor Whisperer. So this guy knows bird behavior really well. So we're really lucky tonight to have him talking to us about, especially Dolly. And, you know, just a little backstory on Dolly. She was also an evacuation from a wild nest. I don't know how many folks knew about that. Back in 2011, she was a chick in a nest in Pinnacles National Park, one of the first nests in the park. And she broke her wing. We believe she fell out of the nest and injured her wing, and we didn't know how bad it was. We sent a crew. I was part of a crew that went and rescued her. We got her down to LA Zoo, and their staff looked her over. She had a really bad break on her wing. They attempted multiple surgeries, pretty, you know, first time ever type surgeries to save her wing. Unfortunately, they weren't able to. And then it was decided by the program that Dolly should become an education bird, and who better to help make her an education bird than someone like Mike, who really, really knows how these birds think. And he definitely thinks like a condor. And he's been a great resource to me as a biologist out in the field. We always call Mike and get input on, we see weird stuff with the birds. I can't say enough. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mike Clark. And I think Debbie's there too, Mike, right? Yeah, so we have Debbie Sears is there well, and she's been working with condors quite a long time as well. So really a privilege and honor to have not only Dolly, but to have these awesome people showing us. And then there's going to be another bird later. So I'll let you go roll with it, Mike. So thank you. Go for it, Mike.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, my name's Mike Clark. I've been here at the LA Zoo since 1989, working with California condors. Back then, we didn't have any birds like Dolly, you know, that we could show people, and we didn't have an exhibit. Still don't have an exhibit, but we do have the one and only California Condor ambassador for the program. And Dolly is, like Joe said, she is 9 years old. She's flightless. She can't fly. You can see that the far wing on her is kind of sticking up a little bit more than the other one. She is sort of trained to sit on this perch and sort of tolerate people coming around and looking at her. And she really makes a huge impact on people when they see a bird like this up close. I mean, you normally only see them flying around at the top of a tree or something like that. But when you see one like this, super close, and see how powerful they are now and how beautiful they are up close, it really does make an impact. She knows she's on camera now, so she's going to act up. Anyway. So yeah, so Dolly is as an ambassador has done a lot for the program. The awareness because of her presence here and her being able to come up to Ventana and do the fundraisers that we've done over the years, and anything we can ever do to help our partners like Ventana, we always love to come up and participate in that. And Dolly loves to travel. So at the LA Zoo, like Joe mentioned, in the 80s, there really wasn't a lot known about California condor behavior, breeding, captive breeding. Nobody had ever bred them in captivity before. And it was kind of an emergency at the time to round up the last wild birds and bring them into captivity for their own safety, because there was no real information about what was really causing the birds to decline so quickly, and we really didn't have a lot of time to deal with it. So the choice was made to bring all the birds into captivity to save them from extinction and to try to build a captive breeding program. And so that's kind of when I started towards the end of the 80s, and it was only 2 years earlier that the very last California condor was brought into captivity. We built 12 very large flight cages. They're 100 feet long by about 40 to 50 feet wide and about 60 feet tall. And so they're very large, airy, roomy cages. Nobody knew, again, how to breed California condors. Nobody knew if they would breed in captivity. And so everybody at the time was just doing their best to try to collect as many birds as possible so that the bird had a chance to sort of squeak by extinction, which seemed to be imminent at the time. So again, 30 years later, we know so much about condors as it relates to husbandry, incubation of the eggs, rearing of the chicks, what to do, what not to do, as Joe and Kelly know very well, what not to do when you're releasing and that type of thing. And we had to keep trying it over and over and over. But basically, our job at the LA Zoo started as a breeding facility. And because we had a lot of experience with large raptors and vultures, like the Andean condor, which is a cousin of the California condor, and the Andean condor is the largest flying bird in the world with an 11-foot wingspan and weighing up to about 31 pounds, the big males do. California condors are a bit smaller than that, 9.5-foot wingspan, pretty generally. Males are a bit larger than females, weigh about 2 pounds more on average. Average California condor male is somewhere between 20 and 22 pounds, and females are about 18 to 20 pounds. So in captivity, we have a lot of chance to really get in their heads, watch what they do. We have everybody on cameras. They can't really go anywhere without us seeing them, and we can see what they're up to, and we study them very closely. And we know what they like, we know what they don't like, we know what causes them to breed quicker, we know what causes them to be disturbed. And so what we do here is we try to get the most out of each pair as we possibly can. So condors' natural history is, as you know from watching the nest cams at Anderson, they lay one egg, and it's a very slow process. It's a 57-day incubation period, and then the chick probably won't fledge until it's 5.5 as old. It's 5.5, 6 months old.
How are you?
And so that's a lot of time to make one bird. So what we end up doing is we capitalize on what happens in the wild on occasions. They lay an egg and in the wild, and maybe some predator comes along and
oh yeah, I forgot about that. Okay.
that or
Yeah.
somebody else talking.
I know.
They might break the egg or eat the egg, and the birds have nothing to raise. Well, they'll sort of they'll lay another egg in about 30 days, and so we'll do that in captivity. So they'll lay an egg, we'll take the egg away, and they'll turn around and lay another one. And on occasion, they'll lay 3. So that's 3 eggs. That's like 6 times normal reproductive in one pair. And when you're trying to build a wild population like that, that kind of production can really make a big difference when you're trying to establish that wild population out there, especially when you're losing them to things like lead and fire and stuff like that. So so we've learned a lot of techniques to get them to breed faster, breed more, get new pairs together quicker. That's some of the stuff that I really get into and enjoy trying to figure out and develop techniques to try to make that stuff happen. And some of the more recent things that we've been able to pull off, and this is something that me and Joe have talked about for probably 15 years, is wood birds raise more than one chick. When you have that many chicks, when you breed that many chicks, the parents only raise one chick. Well, if you get 2 eggs from every pair, who's going to raise all the rest of the chicks? Well, we end up having to raise them, and we use the hand puppet, and there's protocols for that. It's we can get them to be just as good at release candidates that way, but it's a heck of a lot more work, and it's just so much easier to just let parents do it. So Joe and I had questions like, why couldn't we get them to raise two chicks or maybe 3 chicks? And it was never we were never really in a position where we could even experiment on something like that, because if something happened to one of the chicks, it would just be disastrous. We just couldn't afford that kind of a loss. We never really had the chance to use surrogate chicks like an Andean condor chick or maybe King Vulture chicks to try to get 2 chicks into a nest box at one time. And so it just kind of went on the back burner. It never really happened. Well, at one point, before we got Dolly, we had a female condor that was kind of tame. It was one of the eggs that was taken in the wild in the 80s, I think in 1984 or something like that. there was a pair that had 2 eggs taken from their wild nest and hatched in captivity to use as captive breeding birds. Those 2 birds were number 39 and number 40. 39 being Anyapa and 40 being Squapuni, both females. So sisters that were only a month apart. At one point, Anyapa was doing really good in captivity, breeding a lot, raising lots of chicks. She had a mate. They got along really well. They're very prolific. At some point, there was some genetic problem with the chicks that were coming out of that pair, and so the geneticists decided to break the pair up. And since Squapuni and Anyapa had been breeding so much, their genes were very well represented in the population. And part of breeding them in captivity is we look at all of the genetics of the entire population every single year. And we have top geneticists looking at all of the subject numbers and looking to see who would be the best genetic matchup for these birds, considering we started out with 22 or 23 birds in the world. And so we're trying to create this big hundreds and hundreds of bird population out of 22 birds. So when you are a geneticist or statistician, you look at those genetics and you go, wow, can we do this without doing too much inbreeding? Well, thankfully with this group of birds, all their DNA was studied very closely, and it appears that we do have 90% genetic diversity in the very few birds that we started with. So if we're very careful in the way that we breed them, we can maintain 90% genetic diversity even in the big, large picture as we go up into the 500, 600, 700, hopefully up into like 2,000 birds. We'll still have genetic diversity that will keep the bird from going into some kind of a genetic bottleneck. So in Anyapa's case, she was not sort of set into another breeding situation. And so she was just sort of alone. She also had a problem with her eye, and it was eventually cancerous, and it had to be removed. So she only had one eye, but she got around just fine, and seemed just as happy as a clam. But she didn't have a mate. She was very affable with people, very happy bird, and really easy to take care of. Never had any problems with her. And so we thought we would, since we didn't have an exhibit here at the zoo, and there wasn't really anything planned at the moment, we decided to say, well, why don't we make this bird an ambassador bird? Because there was no ambassador bird. We couldn't bring any birds out and show birds to the public. And we did a lot of work for the program, but we really didn't get any of the sort of, press for it, or get the public to be able to enjoy it. Everything was always like, a picture of an egg or a picture of a chick and, that kind of thing. Or we sent 10 birds out for release. We really didn't have anybody to sort of like do a one-on-one with. Like a lot of the other zoos have exhibits, the birds can be seen. So we didn't have that yet. So we said, let's do even better. Well, let's have an ambassador. So Anyapa became that ambassador bird. So in the process of training Anyapa to be that ambassador bird, Dolly came along. So 2011, I was sort of in the last phases of training Anyapa, and then we got this crippled bird here that we tried to maintain isolated, tried to maintain, keep it from being habituated to people, and still try to do surgery, finish rearing it, because it was only 4 months old at the time. And when we found out the wing was not going to the bird was not going to be able to fly, we said, okay, well, it's so young, it would be really easy to tame down and probably really easy to train. So let's just use her. And so we got the okay to use her, and was sort of the end of the story for Anyapa as far as being an exhibit bird or an ambassador bird. Well, during the time that I was training Anyapa, as happens with a lot of birds, especially birds that live in pairs, like condors do. Once they get into a breeding pair, they're pretty much together all the time, unless one's rearing a chick or sitting on an egg. Anyapa pair bonded to me, and so she was extremely attached to me. And so we sort of said, okay, we knew she could rear chicks. And so whenever we had like a chick that we didn't have any pair to rear it, we could just give it to Inyapa and she would rear it. And so we came into a situation where we had two chicks that were very similar of age. We said, hey, normally we wouldn't try this with an adult pair, because the pairs become very defensive of their nests. And they can become aggressive in captivity, even to their chicks. So it just really wasn't worth risking any chicks to try to experiment. But in this case, we had a situation where somebody could actually mediate this situation. So I kind of floated the idea to everybody, and it was kind of the best opportunity. We had the chicks. One was like 9 days old, one was 15 days old. And we said, and she was already rearing one of them. So I thought it would be pretty easy just to slip one in there and see if they could even tell the difference. And I could sit in there with her while she was doing it. And if it worked, great. I would just sort of remove myself from the situation, and the chicks would be reared by bird and wouldn't be habituated to somebody like that, and just fledge normally. And then we would just incorporate those chicks into the release candidates that would go up to either Ventana or one of the other release sites. And so we did. It was a very tense moment when I was trying to get Inyapa to return to the nest, because every time you go in the nest, she would leave thinking there was a nest exchange, right? So she would leave and she wouldn't come back until I left, but I wasn't willing to leave completely. And so there's a lot of tense moments there. And so finally I was able to encourage her to go in there, and she didn't even seem like she could tell the difference. And she just fed both of them. And the biggest problem was getting the chicks to get along. California condors are very aware as young birds. They're not like raptors where they just sort of accept everything up until a certain age before they sort of wake up and say, I don't like that and I like that. They just pretty sit there in a group and just take food from the parents. Condors are not like that. Within a day maybe, they would, if you put something new into the nest, they reject it. They'll hiss and strike at it. They can learn to feed themselves within 24 hours. If you're hand rearing them, you can just put food in a bowl and they'll eat it. That's just something that is not very common in a lot of birds that are altricial like this. But condors kind of mix precocial and altricial. They're almost like 25% precocial and 75% altricial, meaning, precocial birds are birds like ducks and chickens that get up and run around right after they hatch. Condors can get around pretty good by about 2 weeks of age. They'll walk around the nest. You've seen the bird in the Anderson nest. They can just sort of walk around and explore the entire thing. So we did that in Inyapa. She raised 2 chicks successfully. They fledged, and both chicks were released. And as far as I know, they're still both out there. So the next step was to try it with a breeding pair. And so we had a really good pair that were very friendly and really got along really well. We tried it with them the next year, 2018, and it went off without a hitch. It was perfect, and it worked exactly like it did with Inyapa. And so the next year, every single chick that we raised, which was 6, was part of what we call a double brood. And the parents just go right along with it. They don't seem to be able to tell the difference. They almost seem more stimulated with more chicks, and they become much more attentive. They eat more because they know how to feed more, and the chicks just come out perfect. And it's just a really awesome husbandry tool that we can use in captivity to get all parent-reared birds if we wanted to. So at the LA Zoo, we maintain 11 breeding pairs. And you think about it, if you got 2 eggs for every pair, that's 22 eggs. That's a lot of chicks to raise in 1 year. Fortunately and unfortunately, we don't always get to it. We're not always going to get 22 eggs. Some years are good, some years are bad. Some years you have really good fertility, some years you have terrible fertility. Like this year, for instance, we had a record 18 eggs. We've never had 18 eggs before. We've had, the most we ever had was 17, and that was in 1996. And 17 of those, and I think we hatched 15 of them. So that was a really banner year for us. This year we had 18 eggs, but we only got 6 chicks out. So it was, as far as we don't know what that was. Some of the other facilities had some same problems. Also in the wild, the like Southern California had a lot of attempted nestings and didn't only have 1 chick in the wild right now. So there's definitely something going on there. We don't know if it's, you know, cyclic or whatever. It's just not very well understood. So, but we're prepared next year, and we expect a really big year next year, because we had 3 new pairs this year that were only introduced, you know, a couple of months before breeding season, and some of them were introduced during breeding season, and they still produced. And, we used some of those introduction techniques I was talking about earlier to get these birds where in the past you might not expect any production in a pair after you put them together for maybe 2 years. So we're getting to using some of the techniques we've used to introduce these pairs in a very structured way, and at certain times of year when their hormones are at certain levels, we've been able to get, I think the best we've ever done was we had a fertile egg with a pair that had only been introduced and known each other for 39 days. So there is something there to be learned. We can't always pull that off. We can almost always get the birds to lay and copulate within the first 2 months. Doesn't necessarily mean we can get an egg right away. So we've learned a lot, and we've shared it with all the other facilities, and they've shared a lot of breeding techniques and tricks with us too. So
Yeah, Mike, I just want to jump in and just tell everybody, all these techniques Mike's talking about have never been done before. So, you know, it's pretty incredible. He talks about it casually, but they've had a ginormous impact on this program. And that basically domino effects out to the field, because that gives us more birds to release and better quality birds in terms of they're better prepared behaviorally. And so Mike and crew have just been really good about listening to us. The feedback loop has been incredible in terms of understanding the behavior of these birds and getting the best bird, giving every bird the best chance at survival in the wild. I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day, is these birds that come out of the zoo, you know, they aren't a zoo, but these guys do incredible things to keep them wild. It's amazing. I just wanted to make sure everybody, Mike's playing it down a little bit, but it's a pretty incredible thing that LAZU's done, and they've been leaders. And so it's been a really great. And hey, Mike, we got a few questions about Dolly, if I can interject. One question we have is, it is from, let's see, Carrie Morris is asking, what does Dolly weigh?
It's good. It's a very good question. A wild condor has a considerable amount of muscle mass in their breast, so they can flap those giant wings, so they have a big breast muscles. And since Dolly doesn't fly, she doesn't really have a chance to build up those breast muscles. And so normally a bird of Dolly's age would be approximately 18 to 20 pounds. Dolly weighs about 15 to 16 pounds. She gets all the food she could possibly eat. She has favorites.
What's her favorite?
Probably rabbits. You know, it depends on what she's had the day before and the day before that. You know, she's a diva for sure.
So she's 9 now, right?
Yeah, 9 years and 5 months.
Yeah, it's amazing to see her coloration now. I hadn't seen her in a few months.
Yeah, the camera really doesn't do it justice. I mean, her color probably in the last year and a half is, we were really worried because she did mature very slowly, and it's probably due to the traumatic early part of her life. It kind of stunted her how she matured, and whether it happened at the same time it would be with wild bird. But she just in the last 2 years has made a dramatic change in her plumage, the color of her skin, her attitude. She acts like an adult. She's just in full adult plumage as a 9-year-old. You think about a 9-year-old bird that you released, and like you go, oh yeah, you're right in the breeding zone right there. She hasn't shown any real she's like I said, I was Inyapa was pair bonded with me, and Dolly is pair bonded with my coworker Debbie. The birds just, I mean, we all used to work with her, and she just sort of gravitated towards Debbie, and hasn't really shown any, urge to start up a romance or go into the nest box and lay an egg or anything like that. But I'm sure it's coming at some point.
Yeah, because that was the question. Two people asked the question, Marcel and Kari Bauer. They both asked, is she going to eventually, potentially, will she, I mean, with her wing, I've always wondered that too. Will she be able to captive breed and have a pair and have a mate?
She's not necessarily high on the list of genetics, but there's no reason why she couldn't, if we found the right setup, there's no reason why she couldn't rear chicks, and there's no reason why she
That would be great.
lay eggs if there was a way to get them fertile. I don't think there is right now. I mean, there are ways you can do artificial insemination and stuff like that. Lots of breeders do that. I don't know that it would work with a condor in this situation, but it's something that's down the line. I mean, this bird's going to live a long time. It's going to outlive all of us. So, yeah,
And
she's got great care. She has a very, very happy life.
yeah, Steve and Kathy Schwartz asked if is Dolly available for zoo visitors to see?
During certain events, yes. She comes out to our fundraiser and other different events. If we had a big, IVAD celebration, International Vulture Awareness Day, she would definitely be out there. And yeah, there's events. Yeah, we definitely have events, and a lot of times when we do our Earth Day, we'll have her out on the perch, out in the zoo, so people can walk by and take pictures. And yeah, definitely. She's the ambassador.
Yeah, and does Dolly get to socialize? This is from Rebecca. She's asking if Dolly gets to socialize with other condors, or does she mostly stay with you guys, or Debbie, or
Dolly is a parent-reared condor, so she knows condors very well. Her cage is right up against our breeder cages, so she can see all the breeders all the way up and down our facility, and she can see what's going on. We actually use Dolly to help train our breeders to lock up. So Dolly gets fed first. She makes a big deal over the fact that she got food first and jumps around with it in her mouth and shows everybody that she's got the food, and they all get jealous, and we end up being able to get all the other breeders to do their sort of routine of locking up every day. And so she does socialize that way visually. To be in contact with other birds would be very dangerous for Dolly. Condors, as you know, or as Joe knows, they can be very aggressive towards each other, and especially if the bird that's being chased doesn't fly away. It can be seen as being, not taking the other bird seriously. And so that's another thing that we have problems with captive breeding. Part of the courtship process is the male chases the female in the early part of the breeding season, before they're really kind of getting along, that type of thing. As the testosterone starts to seep into him, he starts to chase the female around and gets aggressive, and the female just flies away. The females are lighter, they're a little bit faster, and so she can get away. They're smaller, faster, they can get away. And so the male over time starts to change his approach, and starts being nicer, and then starts to splay. If you were to put Dolly in a breeding situation with a big male, he would, in the beginning of the breeding season, he would start to chase her around. Well, she doesn't really have the ability to get away, and so if he did catch her, there's nothing to know. You wouldn't know what would happen to her. So she just can't. We can't risk that with Dolly. So, and again, she's not necessarily that genetically valuable for the captive breeding program and for release. So otherwise she wouldn't have been sort of up for release in the first place. So if what you may not know is that Dolly was not an egg. She was a chick that was in a wild nest, but she's not from an egg that was produced in the wild. She was a lot of times when we have nests in the wild, including the Anderson nest and a lot of other big sort of nests in the beginning of the program, of the breeding program in the wild, some of the eggs would be bad, and we just wanted to have a chick to study. And so we would take one of the eggs that was fertile at the zoo and switch out an infertile egg or a broken egg in the wild with this fertile egg, or one that was just about to hatch that we had in captivity. It would hatch in the wild nest, and then the chick would raise and be released that way in a more natural way. So that was the case with Dolly. She was an egg that was from Portland Zoo, who has a big breeding facility there, one of our partners. So that egg was flown down from Portland, driven up to Pinnacles, where the crew and somebody probably from the zoo, or they just handed the egg off, and was placed in that nest that didn't have a good egg. And Dolly hatched from that. And as the nest was being monitored, at about 4 months of age, that was when they noticed that Dolly broke her wing, and then she returned to captivity. And so, yeah. So if those chicks that are being released are their parents are very well represented genetically in the population. So a little lesson in captive breeding with condors and an endangered species especially is you don't want to release your very valuable genetics. You need as many of those in captivity reproducing until they aren't rare anymore. And keep repairing the birds as the geneticists recommend. And
Yeah, and so Mike, in the zoo, you guys have some of the original 27, right? You have a couple, or
we have
that was one of the questions from the viewers. Do you have any? Good.
So yeah, well, what we call the original birds, or birds that are of unknown parentage, meaning that we don't know who the parents are, those are called founders. And the founders are the ones that have the original genetics from the wild population. We have 3 of those, and I think they're all 3 the most genetically valuable. We have studbook. You have all those studbooks out there. You're all the way up to, you talked about studbook number 1033. Well, we have studbook number 1. That's Topa, and he is a 54-year-old California Condor, male California Condor that's still breeding in captivity. He looks no older than Dolly. I mean, he looks perfect. These birds live a long time, and especially if they're in a protected situation like the zoo, where they're getting medical care, fresh food, fresh water, shelter, all the things that they need. You know, they're built for the wild, so they're overly sort of prepared for a rough life. So living in the zoo is very easy for them, and so that's it. And we're very lucky that they breed so willingly in captivity. Some comparison I like to use is that if you were to take these wild birds of any other species, like a golden eagle or a bald eagle or something like that, and these large raptors, and put them in captivity, you may not get breeding for years and years, if ever, and maybe none at all. Condors bred right away in captivity, almost right away, like within a year or two. These founder birds were immediately realized how good they had it, and just started breeding right away. And we're very lucky that is the case with this species, because it really has sort of walked us through the fact that we can, we do a lot of manipulations, like I talked about, double broods, the triple clutching, and all these things to try to get as many birds. But it would never be, it wouldn't be possible without the sort of, willingness of this species. I like to say condors are like the ultimate optimists in every situation. They turn lemons into lemonade. They really do.
Yeah. So is Topa the oldest breeding known bird in captivity, right?
Yeah, I believe he's the oldest known bird in the population. There's reason to believe that some of the other birds that we have might be older. We just don't know. It may be that Topa has lived a life of luxury, so he looks really good. He's not as weathered as some of these founders that we have, like AC6 and Tama. We have 3 founders, number 5, number 11, and number 33. That's 5 is AC6, adult condor 6. It's an adult male condor. He was trapped. He was first observed as an adult in the 70s. So he's at least, I don't know, 45 or something like that. I mean, if you look at the stud book, it'll say 76 was the probable hatch. You know, at least he was hatched at least by 1976. So all the founders that are unknown age, the stud book just says 1976 across the board. So we're all assuming they're at least that old. And then up from that is Tama. Tama is an adult female founder, number 11, and she looks and acts old. Joe used to take care of her up in Oregon. There. She's old, she's creaky, she's cantankerous. She acts like a male bird. She pushes all the other birds around. But she's a great bird. She's the mother of AC9, who was the last wild California condor trapped in 1987. So he would be a founder had it not been for the fact that they were able to watch him in the nest as a chick, grow up, fledge, and eventually breed in the wild. So he was probably the most, he's probably the best studied wild California condor in the early program in the 80s.
Wow.
Last one is Sequoia, number 33, very valuable bird. He was pulled as a chick from a giant sequoia redwood tree hollow in the Sequoia National Forest, up in a place called Starvation Grove. And he was taken at about 4 months of age, kind of the same age Dolly was taken, and was raised in captivity to be a breeder. And and all these birds, I mean, I've been around them a long time. They all have their own particular personalities, particular likes and dislikes. And, you know, those three birds, those three founders that we have, AC6, Tama, and Sequoia, they could not be more different as individuals. Tama, again, has her personality. She's kind of a smaller hen. AC6 is very scared and wild, and he's so old, he has like heart problems. He gets medication every day to keep him healthy. We've trained him to take his pills every day. You know, this is captive breeding, you guys. This is something that, you know, these birds have to survive, and they have to breed for there to be a breeding program. Many of the birds that are out there are the chicks. Many of the birds that you see out there that you're watching on the Nest Cam and on the all the webs and Ventana's websites and Condor Spotter, a lot of these birds all came from these founders that I'm talking about over the years. Sequoia is a extremely beautiful bird. He's very elaborate in his plumage. He's very tall and long and lean. I mean, they all have different body types, and he's just one of the most beautiful birds we've ever had, and always has been. Takes care of himself meticulously. I mean, I can go on and on with every bird that we have and bore everybody. But if there's any other questions.
Yeah, you know, just in celebrating kind of, you know, I mean, I love just looking at Dolly there. It's been fun watching her behind you, just kind of hanging out and just seeing her mannerisms, and she's kind of just sitting there listening to you too. But I know you said you have another bird, you know, in the interest of International Vulture Awareness Day that we might be able to look at. Is Kasike going to be part of the show today?
Yeah, so it'll take me like 1 minute to grab him while Debbie takes Dolly out. And
okay.
If you have something to say to everybody.
Yeah, I can definitely, I can talk more about, yeah, I see some other good questions here. There was one here earlier, a lot around hierarchy, which I love. Yeah, and when do chicks, this is from Alicia, Alicia, this is when do chicks fledge and what stages? When and how do they join the herd? And how is their pecking order established as youngsters? So chicks that fledge in the wild have the advantage of having mom and dad with them. So a condor will leave the nest. You heard Mike touch on it earlier. we see it's right around 6 months in age, you know, give or take a couple weeks. And so when they fledge, they immediately follow mom and dad around. Mom and dad will continue to feed them for up to another year. And not only that, they follow the parents around, and the parents shepherd them into the flock. So they basically greet them. And they have the protection of the parents, which is pretty key. Because you heard Mike talking about the hierarchy is pretty vicious if you're not careful. And a young unknowing bird, if it doesn't have the right etiquette, it can be kind of pushed aside by the flock. And so it's really important that these birds, oh, here comes Kasike. This is awesome. But yeah, to wrap that up, just talking, Mike, about these young birds that have to kind of assimilate to the flock and the social hierarchy, like most vultures do. Even I'm sure it's the same with king vultures too. But how the wild chicks have the advantage of having mom and dad, and they basically kind of get brought into the flock, and then as they build up confidence, they naturally start to move away and become more independent and basically confidence builds up. They'll make a few friends basically in the flock, some social bonds with some other young birds, and then they basically are let go by mom and dad start nesting again. So that's why condors generally nest every other year, because they're spend that off year showing the chick the ropes, basically assimilate it to the flock. But yeah, that's a good question. Cool. I love looking at Cacique. That is one of the most amazing looking vultures on the planet, I think.
Yeah, probably the most beautiful carrion eater you could find. Kasike is a male king vulture. He is, 30 years old. He is the very first chick that I hatched with this program in 1990. So he's 30. Yeah, he's 30. He was hatched on April 1st, 1990, and we've been together ever since. So he has always been an ambassador bird for our program, and he's pair bonded to me, kind of like as they do, because I was around him. I'm kind of the last person that's still around from the early 90s. And I did take a lot of interest in him. We raised a whole bunch of king vultures in the very beginning of the breeding program, mostly because the behavior of the chicks is very similar to California condors. They're New World vultures as well, so they're distantly related. All the New World vultures, Andean condors, California condors, king vultures. I'm going down in size. Andeans, California condors, king vultures, turkey vultures, yellow-headed vultures, and black vultures as we go down the line. Black vultures being the smallest. King vultures are again, they're the bigger size vulture for the group. Condors being the biggest, but they're built very similar to California condors. They just look, their coloring and stuff is very different, but they have a lot of things in common. If you were to show somebody a picture of the feet of a king vulture and a feet of a California condor, that's all you could see. It would be very hard to tell the difference other than size. But we use these king vultures sort of to teach the keepers what normal behavior was. So we hand reared these things with no isolation, while simultaneously raising the very first California condor chicks that we ever raised in the breeding program. We've raised our first chicks in 1990. At the time, Dr. Mike Wallace was in charge of the zoo's condor program and was the team leader for the entire condor program, and he thought it would be very beneficial for us, people who had never raised any vultures before, to really get a good feel for what a chick, how it acts, what it likes, that type of thing, where we could be like hands-on the whole time. They were exposed to us. We were imprinting them, while at the same time doing the exact same thing with California condors, but doing it in complete isolation where the birds can't see you and you're using condor puppet to sort of simulate what the parents would do. So we would have this puppet right here, looks like a California condor, and we would use it to feed the chick, to nuzzle it, to sort of preen it and do all these things. And the chicks would sort of imprint on this thing and not us. We'd be behind a black screen, and the chicks would just only be only seeing this stuff. But to do that is very difficult when you can't really have hands-on. We're behind screens, we could barely see the chicks. It was very important at the time to be extremely good with the isolation of these chicks and keep them from being keeping us from being associated with food or any kind of comfort whatsoever. And it ended up being even more important than we even thought it was, as Joe and Kelly recall in the 90s when we first started releasing birds at Ventana. The isolation and the socialization of the birds became forefront of the entire release program. And so we had to change everything that we did as far as rearing is concerned, especially with the puppet rearing. Parent rearing was a no-brainer. You just let the parents do it. Problem was, in the early 90s, nobody had let condors rear chicks in captivity. They were just too precious. There was only, when I started in the program in 1989, there was only 30 birds in the whole world. So it was very, very touchy to even be able to have one in at all, and to risk it with adult pairs that are very aggressive and fight and tussle around and stuff like that. We were very nervous to have the birds parent rear. So we took all of them at hand rear from the very beginning. As time went on and as we bred more and more chicks, we started to play around with parent rearing. We had kind of a rule where we would have, before a pair could raise a California condor chick, they had to prove how good they were at it by raising an Andean condor chick or a King Vulture chick. And so most of the pairs that we had at the time had reared an Andean condor prior to rearing a California condor chick. And so we had lots of Andean eggs around because we were also involved in the South American release of Andean condors at the time that Mike Wallace was involved in, with our other partners at San Diego Wild Animal Park. We were both breeding Andean condors and sending them to South America for release and using the same techniques. And we would be raising California condors, and right next in the tub next to that, where we'd be raising Andean condors. So, so it was a big vulture propagation thing going on.
Hey Mike, real quick, just some maybe go over some of the characteristics of the Cacique, like everyone's asking about the yellow, the fleshy skin on the beak, and just kind of.
Yeah. There's a lot of evidence to New World vultures and Old World vultures that some of these decorations that they have on their face, they mean something to the birds. There's some way that they can use them to communicate or to flash around when they're near carcasses or for breeding. If you look at all the vulture species, even the Old World vultures that are not even related to California condors or King vultures, the sort of the bald head, the bald neck, that kind of thing, that's just purely for cleanliness and for sanitary reasons. And if you are in the business of sticking your head all the way into a carcass to get food out of it, you're going to get that all over your feathers. So it makes sense for them to have a bald head. Well, when you have a bald head and neck, that opens up a lot of opportunity for expression. And so a lot of these birds over millennia have adapted all kinds of colors and fleshy things to sort of help express emotions to each other. And so what Kasike has here, I'll get him closer so you can see it. Come on, buddy. Kasike has this fleshy, sort of, looks like almost a cluster of grapes hanging from his nose. And it just flops around. That's called a carbuncle. And it gets bigger with age. It tends to be bigger in males. New World vultures like condors and King vultures, they have traditional sexual dimorphism, meaning the males are larger and generally more elaborate than the females are, like it is in most birds. Raptors are different. They have reverse sexual dimorphism where the females are larger, and that's why condors aren't really necessarily raptors. and shouldn't be sort of classified as raptors. They kind of look like raptors, and they do eat sort of the same thing, but they are carrion eaters, and they don't have a grasping foot like a raptor, which gives a raptor the name, grasping foot.
What's their natural range? They're South America, right?
Central and South America. This bird started off as a juvenile. Cacique was like a condor, is completely black from beak to foot, just completely black. And then as time goes on, those feathers start to pop in. A couple white ones pop in here and here and here, and then the color starts to sort of. And the carbuncle that we were talking about before is just this little bump. It's nothing. And so again, it gets bigger with age.
Yeah, and most of the communication, like condors, right, is nonverbal.
Yeah.
I keep hearing them huffing.
Yeah, he to me, only to me. Well, he's starting to do it to our volunteer, but it's condors do the same thing. They do a little woof for a greeting. Hear that? You see yourself?
Oh, is he seeing himself?
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. I mean, that head, I mean, there's just nothing like a king vulture. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
And the camera's not doing it justice. I mean, you look up on the internet and look what a king vulture looks like, and you go, wow, those eyes, they're just pure white eyes. They're snow white eyes.
Wow. Well, yeah, I know some of our viewers have been to some of our past fundraisers down in Big Sur, and they got to meet Cacique. And yeah, when you see him in person, it's just unbelievable. So
Yeah.
is he another bird that's available? Do you guys ever take him out around the zoo?
Oh yeah, he's been doing it his whole life. And
Oh, that's cool.
And since he's not part of the program, he's not part of the California Condor program proper. Oops. He can do more events. You know, the Condor is so much more protected, and Dolly's really restricted to program related events. So she's not going to go to a party at somebody's house or something like that. But Kasike can go to those things.
Oh, wow. Well, I think that was our cue. Cacique was basically exit stage right or left there. And I think that's a wrap, Mike. But man, I cannot thank you enough. And Debbie too, she's been hiding the whole time, but Debbie needs to come out and say hi. But man, we can't thank you enough. And hi, Debbie. Yeah. Awesome. And yeah, again, thank you guys for your support. I mean, you've always been such an awesome partner. We've learned a lot from you, you know, just without you, we wouldn't be, Ventana wouldn't be where it's at. So we really can't thank you guys enough down there. And thanks for all the support for the fire rebuild. You know, you guys have seen us go through this a couple times. So again, LA Zoo all the way. And thank you again. Thank you for joining everybody. We hope to have more of these. And yeah, this was a real treat seeing Cacique and Dolly and hearing from Mike himself. So without further ado, I think we're going to call it. And don't forget, the online auction is still happening tonight. So get on there and get your last bids in. And again, this is all helping us with everything. And of course, you can donate to the rebuild. And again, this is all on our website, ventanaws.org. And again, the outpouring of support has been incredible. And as we get more updates on missing birds, we'll let you all know. Just cross your fingers. We hope some of these guys turn up. And we should know about at least another nest next week. So we should have some news on that. That chick was also in a redwood. We're pretty confident it probably survived based on what we saw with a Nico. It's a similar nest tree. So yeah, just cross your fingers that chick made it. And yeah, hopefully we get that list down. All right, have a great night, everybody, and see you soon.